Hey, welcome back to the channel. Or if you're new here, I'm really glad you found this video. Today's episode is a strange one. We're diving into some real-life paranormal encounters that seriously messed with people's beliefs. These are the kinds of stories where believers walked away doubting everything, and skeptics were forced to ask, wait, what just happened? And let me ask you this. Have you ever experienced something you just couldn't explain? Like, something that made your skin crawl even though you thought you were being rational? Because these people did. And their stories are intense. Also, real quick, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your area. I love knowing where everyone's tuning in from. I might even shout out a few comments in the next video. And hey, as we go through these stories, let me know which one you think was the most believable, or the most terrifying, or both. Alright, let's get into it. Starting with a story that made a seasoned ghost hunter question everything she thought she knew. Alright, so this first story is about a woman named Sarah who had spent over a decade investigating haunted places. If anyone was a skeptic, it was her. She was a professional paranormal investigator, the type who spent nights in dark, spooky places trying to catch evidence of the afterlife. But something happened in a hotel room that made her doubt everything she'd believed up until that point. It all started when Sarah checked into an old hotel, one that had a reputation for being haunted. It was one of those places with creepy stories of guests hearing strange noises, seeing shadows, and sometimes even feeling cold spots in their rooms. But Sarah wasn't worried. She had stayed in haunted places before and never experienced anything she couldn't explain. On the first night, Sarah set up her equipment. She had cameras, voice recorders, and temperature gauges all over the room. She was planning to spend the night capturing paranormal activity. You know, just another night on the job. But as the night wore on, something strange started happening. Around 2 a.m., her temperature gauge suddenly dropped by several degrees. And no, it wasn't the air conditioning. The coldness was so intense that Sarah could actually see her breath in the air, like she was standing outside in the dead of winter. But that wasn't the worst part. Sarah's voice recorder, which had been running all night, began to pick up something unusual. It wasn't just static. It was whispering, not just faintly, but loud, clear whispers. At first, Sarah thought, it was interference, but the whispers were so distinct, they were saying her name. Sarah. She froze. This wasn't the kind of thing you expect to hear while doing paranormal investigations, especially when you're alone in a room. She listened carefully, trying to figure out if it was someone else in the hotel playing a prank or a natural explanation. But there was no one else in the building. The whispers didn't stop. As the hours passed, the strange occurrences kept piling up. The lights flickered on and off without warning. The TV turned on by itself to a static channel, the kind of thing you only see in horror movies. And if that wasn't enough, Sarah started to feel something cold, like hands gently brushing her arms even though she was sitting still. The final straw came when she went to bed around 4 a.m., still unsure whether she should be scared or skeptical. But when she tried to lie down, the blankets suddenly yanked off her body, as though someone had pulled them right off her. She jumped up, expecting to see someone or something there, but the room was empty. It was at that moment that Sarah realized this wasn't some paranormal investigation stunt. Something was genuinely wrong. She packed up and left the hotel in the middle of the night, shaken to her core. She couldn't explain it, and for someone who had spent years investigating the paranormal, that was a big deal. When Sarah returned to the hotel the next day to talk to the staff, she learned that she wasn't the first person to have these kinds of experiences. Several guests had reported similar things happening in that same room. The hotel had been built on land that had a history of paranormal activity, but hearing all this made Sarah reconsider everything she had believed. She had been skeptical of ghost stories her whole career, always looking for logical explanations for things. But what she encountered in that room left her questioning if there was more to the afterlife than she had ever thought. She said something that stuck with me. Sometimes when you're so focused on proving things aren't real, the universe has a way of showing you just how wrong you are. So, what do you think? Would you have stayed the night in that hotel room? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know if any of you have had experiences like Sarah's. Up next, we have a story that involves a scientist who was a die-hard skeptic until something happened in his lab that completely shattered his reality. But before we get into that, make sure you've subscribed so you don't miss out on the rest of these spine-chilling stories. Alright, now this one gave me goosebumps the first time I heard it. This story comes from a guy named Daniel, a biomedical researcher who worked the night shift at a private research facility. He was one of those people who absolutely did not believe in ghosts. Like, not even a little. In his words, if you can't replicate it in a lab, it doesn't exist. But after this one night, he doesn't say that anymore. So here's what happened. Daniel was working late on some analysis involving tissue samples. It was around 3 a.m. and he was the only one in the entire lab building. This wasn't unusual. He liked the quiet, and fewer distractions meant better focus. But that night, things felt different. He said he felt a weird heaviness in the air. Not fear exactly, and just that gut feeling like something was off. Anyway, he's working away, and suddenly he hears a loud metal clang from one of the storage rooms down the hall. At first, he thinks it's something falling off a shelf. No big deal. But when he gets up to check it out, the door is locked. Here's the thing though, it's a self-locking door, and nobody else had access that night. He had the only keycard logged in at that time. Still trying to stay rational, he tells himself it might have been the building settling or some air pressure thing, science-y explanation. But then it gets worse. He heads back to his desk, and his computer monitor is now showing static, not a blue screen, not a frozen system, static, like an old TV. He had never even seen that happen on that machine before. And while he's staring at it confused, he hears footsteps in the hallway, not soft ones. Heavy, slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone wearing boots. He runs out, thinking maybe security showed up or someone broke in. But the hallway is completely empty. And here's the creepiest part. When he looked at the security camera feed on the lab's internal system, it showed him sitting at his desk. But the hallway camera picked up another figure walking past behind him. But the thing is, in real life, no one had passed behind him. He checked the footage again and again, even tried to slow it down. And every time, there it was. A tall, dark figure walking past just out of focus. Now at this point, Daniel starts to panic. He tries to leave, and his keycard stops working. It keeps showing access denied at the front exit. He said he nearly had a breakdown at that point. He was locked in with whatever this thing was. About 20 minutes later, the card worked again like nothing had happened. He left everything, computer, samples, gear, and just bolted out of the building. He didn't even lock up. Now here's where it gets interesting. Daniel thought he was losing it, right? So the next day, he brought it up, hesitantly, to one of the older lab staff members. And guess what? They didn't even look surprised. Turns out the building used to be part of an old sanitarium decades ago, one that had a pretty horrific reputation. There were rumors of unethical experiments being done there in the 1940s and 50s, and ever since the lab was built on the property, people have been seeing things, hearing voices, even quitting their jobs without explanation. Daniel never worked another night shift again, and to this day he refuses to talk about that figure on the security camera. He just says, "Sometimes it's not about what you believe. It's about what you can't unsee." So now I've got to ask, do you think science can explain everything? Or are there some things that just go beyond logic? Let me know in the comments. And if you're someone who used to be a skeptic but saw something strange, I definitely want to hear your story. Coming up next, a deeply personal experience involving a man and the ghost of his grandfather. Is it a sign from beyond or just the mind playing tricks on a grieving soul? Stick around. All right, this next story hits different, not because it's the scariest, but because it's deeply personal. It comes from a guy named Rehan, a 32-year-old teacher and a deeply religious man. He didn't really believe in ghosts or spirits. He believed in the soul, the afterlife, yes, but anything like haunted houses, possessions, or spirits roaming around, he always said, that's not how it works. But then something happened shortly after his grandfather passed away. And it left him completely torn between what he believed and what he felt. So, Rehan's grandfather had raised him. The two were incredibly close, like best friends with a generation gap. His grandfather passed away after a long illness, and Rayhan was by his side until the very last breath. A few days after the funeral, Rayhan started having the same dream over and over again. In the dream, he's sitting in the family's old living room, and his grandfather walks in, just like he used to, sits across from him and says, "There's something I left for you. It's in the drawer." Rayhan would always wake up before asking which drawer or what exactly was left. At first, he thought it was just grief, maybe his mind trying to process the loss. Totally normal, right? But here's where it gets weird. On the 5th night, he has the dream again. Same living room, same conversation. But this time, his grandfather says, "You have to stop ignoring the signs. Open the bottom drawer in the study." Rayhan wakes up in a cold sweat. He hadn't even thought about that drawer. It was part of an old desk no one used anymore. Out of curiosity, he decides to check. And inside was a small envelope tucked beneath some papers. It had his name on it, written in his grandfather's handwriting. Now, think about this. No one had been in that drawer in years. No one in. The family even knew about the letter. Inside was a short note. "To my dear Rayhan, when you read this, I may not be here, but I want you to know I am always proud of you. Keep doing good, and don't be afraid when things don't make sense. Just trust." That was it. No scary shadows, no flickering lights. But that letter, found exactly where the dream pointed, shook Rayhan's beliefs to the core. He said, "I still don't believe in ghosts like you see in movies. But I also can't deny that some part of him, reached out to me. I don't know if it was divine or just love so strong it lingered. But it changed me." Rayhan now believes that not everything has to be explained logically. Sometimes we just feel things, and maybe love really is powerful enough to cross worlds. So what do you think? Was that just his subconscious mind leading him there? Or was it actually a message from beyond? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had a dream that felt more real than reality, I want to know about it. Okay, this next one is a little more on the classic side. An old mirror, a strange house, and a skeptic who saw something he'll never forget. So this story was shared by a guy named Omar, who said he was never into ghost stories. He called it kid stuff, movies, imagination, sleep paralysis, blah blah blah. But when he was 17, something happened that made him stop making jokes about the paranormal. So Omar and a few of his friends were hanging out at one of their homes. This house belonged to their friend Harris, who had just moved in. Now, the house was old, like early 1900s kind of old. Big wooden floors, weird creaky sounds, doors that didn't close all the way, the whole vintage horror package. But none of them cared. It was just a cool place to chill and play video games. Now here's where it starts. In the hallway outside Harris's room, there was this huge antique mirror. It was tall, with an ornate black frame, and it looked like something out of a haunted mansion. Omar swears the moment he saw it, he got an uncomfortable feeling, like someone had just watched him walk by. Harris tells them, "Yeah, that mirror was here when we moved in. My mom tried to get rid of it, but movers said it was too heavy and fragile." Then he adds casually, "Also, my cousin swears she saw someone else's face in it one night." Everyone laughs it off, except Omar. Even though he's a skeptic, he just didn't like how it looked. There was something off about it. So that night, the group's doing what teenagers do, messing around, watching creepy videos online, trying to scare each other. Eventually, one of them dares Omar to go stand in front of the mirror alone for 3 minutes in the dark. Omar agrees, because he's the one who always says ghosts aren't real, right? So he grabs a flashlight, heads into the hallway, and stands right in front of the mirror. The hallway light is off. It's dim, silent. For the first minute, nothing happens. He's just standing there, watching his reflection, bored. Then he notices something weird. His reflection isn't blinking when he does. At first, he thinks he's seeing it wrong, so he tests it. He blinks twice. The reflection just stares back. He waves his hand. The reflection doesn't move. And then, the reflection smiles. Not a friendly smile. A stretched, cold, inhuman grin. But Omar hasn't moved. He's frozen. He backs away slowly, his heart pounding, and just before he turns to run, the reflection's head tilts to the side, like it's watching him leave. He screams and bolts into the room, pale and shaking. His friends think he's pranking them at first, but they said he looked genuinely terrified, like he'd seen something he couldn't explain. And this is a guy who never got scared. The group avoided the mirror after that, and within a few months, Harris's family managed to get rid of it, donated it to some antique place out of town. But Omar? He says he can't look into any mirror in the dark anymore. He told the story years later and said, "I still don't believe in ghosts the way most people do, but I believe there are things out there we're not supposed to see. And that night, I saw one of them looking back at me. So let me ask you, have you ever felt uneasy around a mirror? Like maybe something else was watching from the other side? Let me know down in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people have similar stories. All right, buckle up, because this one takes us into the world of lucid dreaming, altered states of consciousness, and something way darker than expected. This story was shared by a guy named Alec, who was the definition of a rational thinker. Like, science, logic, neuroscience, that's his world. He didn't believe in the paranormal, ghosts, or spirits. He believed in the brain, and that every weird thing people report can be explained by how the mind works. So Alec volunteered for a university sleep experiment. It was a controlled study on lucid dreaming. The researchers were testing a new technique involving sound stimulation during REM sleep to increase dream awareness. Simple enough. He had to sleep in a lab, hooked up to sensors, with mild audio cues triggered once he entered REM. Now, here's where it starts getting weird. The first night, Alec manages to go lucid. He's flying around in his dream, controlling the environment. It's amazing. Exactly what he expected. He wakes up feeling thrilled, writes it all down. Science works. Boom. But on night 2, things take a turn. This time, while he's dreaming, he becomes lucid again. But instead of a bright landscape or a floating experience, he finds himself in a completely dark room. No windows, no walls, just blackness. And one old wooden door. Naturally, he's curious. It's just a dream, right? He walks toward the door, opens it, and sees a figure standing. On the other side, tall, shadowy, no face, just a presence. He tries to speak, but he can't. No sound comes out. The figure raises a hand and points behind Alec. He turns, and now he's standing in his childhood bedroom. Same old bed, same torn poster on the wall. Then he hears it. A whisper. From under the bed. Not in his dream. He swears he heard the whisper in real life, and it said, "Wake up before it finds you." That's when he panics. He starts trying to force himself to wake up, the way lucid dreamers do, by blinking hard, shaking, whatever. And then he wakes up. Only he's still in the lab, but the lights are off. The room looks wrong. He calls out for the sleep techs. No response. He looks at the monitor next to his bed, and it shows his brain is still in REM sleep. He's dreaming of waking up. That's when the shadow figure walks into the room. Same one from the dream, still faceless, still watching. It sits down on the chair across from him and says, "You came looking for control, but you opened the wrong door." Alec jolts awake for real this time, soaked in sweat, heart racing, totally disoriented. The techs rush in, saying his vitals spiked and he was talking in his sleep, repeating the same phrase over and over. "Don't open the door, don't open the door." The weirdest part? He wasn't supposed to have audio cues that night. The system glitched and didn't play anything. Whatever triggered that level of vividness wasn't from the lab equipment. Alec dropped out of the study after that. He still doesn't believe in ghosts or spirits, but he does believe that consciousness is something way more mysterious than we understand. and he refuses to sleep with his door closed or try lucid dreaming ever again. So now I want to know, have you ever had a dream that felt way too real? Like you weren't supposed to see or hear what you did? Let's talk about it in the comments. I read everyone. And hey, if you've stayed with me through all 5 of these stories, you're kind of a legend. But don't go yet. Let me wrap this up. And that wraps up today's dive into real paranormal encounters, the kind that flipped everything people thought they believed. From skeptics who were forced to reconsider to believers who began to question. One thing is clear. Not everything fits into a neat little box. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had an experience that made you question your beliefs? Do you think these stories are just tricks of the mind, or signs that there's something more out there? Drop your story in the comments. Seriously, I love reading them. And if you're just here to enjoy the ride, tell me, which story hit you the hardest today? Are you watching this late at night? What time is it where you are right now? While you're at it, don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want more creepy, thought-provoking content like this every week. There's plenty more coming. True stories, unsolved mysteries, and things that just don't make sense. Thanks for hanging out with me. Until next time, sleep with the lights on, or don't. That's up to you.